So we were talking about the Knicks and the Nets, and then this colossal trade came down the pike. James Harden is a Brooklyn Net. Kyrie is back from his walkabout. The Nets have had real ups and downs on the court. Harden triple doubling, doing his thing. They dropped 2 games to the Cavs. Kevin, first, let's talk about this trade.
Brooklyn Nets, I mean, they're going all in here for sure. 4 first-round draft picks and 4 first-round pick swaps for James Harden. Like, what was your initial thoughts, like from a fan perspective, when that deal went down?
So I had 2 thoughts that were in opposition to each other. The first is, wow, you just given your entire draft future. Like, I don't even think I've seen like that number of picks and swaps. Very, very extreme. And you gave up 2 of my favorite players from this roster, Jared Allen and Karis LeVert. And they seem like good-spirited guys, young guys with upside. They both were kind of developed by the team. So all of that's heading one direction. But then on the other direction, you have an MVP who wants to come play with your MVP. And that's about it. you look at it.
Well, didn't Jared Allen himself say it? Would you do the trade? Yeah. I believe Taurean Prince also was asked the same question, and he said, yeah, I would do the trade. So even the guys themselves in the trade would do it, and understandably so. I mean, it's bittersweet to give up those guys that were part of, an Allen and LeVert as part of those fun, gritty Nets teams with Kenny Atkinson at head coach the other couple years back. But I mean, this is a trade you do 100 out of 100 times, even despite this, kind of a up and down start we've seen from them.
I felt the same way. It's like, it just boils down to who has the best player on the court. And if you have like the 2 best players on the court, or maybe 3, if you include Kyrie. So then Kyrie comes back, and I got to say, you get these really positive young Thunder vibes from Kevin Durant and James Harden, and then Jeff Green, who a lot of people forget about, but he was like a very high draft pick who played on those Thunder teams. And it seemed like there was some really good chemistry and camaraderie, and they came out, and like Harden had this epic debut, and they were like doing their thing. And then you do have to say that Kyrie comes back, and then you're looking at it, you're like, so first, one of the things that occurred to me was that if I was Kevin Durant and I came to play with Kyrie Irving, in part because they signed together, and then Kyrie goes missing for a significant number of games. I mean, I feel like he missed like over 5 games, I think. Like I had to say that, like, I feel like I might be bent out of shape. Like if I signed with a team and then like my co-signer wasn't there, and then James Harden shows up, and like you go way back with him, that team looked really, really strong. And then Kyrie coming back, Kyrie's super talented, but it did seem like there was another adjustment that has to be made.
For sure. And I think it's going to take time for these guys all to build chemistry, even before the Harden trade. It takes time. I mean, they started 9-8. The 2010-11 Miami Heat started 9-8. And sometimes you got to lose or go through, some bumps before you become the team that you have the potential to be. And with this Nets team, with Kyrie taking that time off for personal reasons, he stated that he, didn't really want to get into. I'm sure that is tough, when that whole team is bought in and sacrificing in their own respective ways. But ultimately, KD and Kyrie, the fact those guys chose to play together, says a lot about their relationship and their ability to get through any difficult times. And I think the fact that Harden wanted to go there and his relationship with KD is going to serve as kind of, I think, that like connective glue on the team. He's not necessarily like a traditional, throwback leader. He's not like a guy who yells at people like Michael Jordan. He's not the LeBron type of leader. But for this team, a star power team, I think KD can keep these guys together through a time like this. And losing 2 games versus Cleveland, this feels like a wake-up call in some ways, because you got the Cavs that, like, this team just fights so hard. Every guy on that roster is trying everything they can to win games. And Steve Nash said after, I think, Friday's game, he's like, we're not a defensive team. We have to, overcome that through effort and hard work and communication. And, maybe for the Nets, it could be a good thing for them to drop some of these games here, because it's going to show the amount of effort they got to put into the defensive end. They can't just outscore everybody, even though they're going to put up a lot of points, and that's what they're going to really, win or lose with is scoring. But their defense does need to be better, and that's my concern with them for sure.
So you say 100 times out of 100 you make this trade, and I agree. They're in it to win it. Now it's clear, like it's title contention or bust, which I appreciate, because I think that anytime a team goes for it in this way, you kind of have to give them credit. I think um, maximizing your uh, chances of winning a title when you're close to it is the right thing to do, and a lot of teams um, maybe don't take that level of commitment or
100%.
investment. So you do it, fantastic. You do have some concerns, I agree, and like the Cavs games sort of spoke to it, where you look at the roster, and Steve Nash said it's not a defensive roster. So even though you make the trade 100 times out of 100 times, Kevin, and you were very optimistic about the Nets pre-trade, you were like, "Look, these guys could win the East and make it to the finals and play probably the Lakers." Look at this stuff. You feel the same way now, having gotten a little bit more like exposure to them on the court?
Definitely. And I think that Bucks game, the game they won, granted, no Kyrie, I feel like that game showed the upside here, because this team, like, their offense has the potential to be like an all-time offense. Like, when have we ever seen three creative genius scorers, with their level of talent, be put together on the same roster? Like, they can play off ball. They've played with other stars in their past. KD, obviously, you mentioned playing with Harden prior, Kyrie playing with LeBron, and KD going to Golden State, all the stars, Harden played with in Houston. These guys can make things work. And you have guys like Joe Harris, who is just going to get countless open shots, and he doesn't need to be open to drain threes. This offense is going to be ridiculous. And with their defense, when it comes to wanting to do this trade 100 times out of 100, you raise your ceiling and you probably, make your defense worse. But it's not like Kyrie in some of those finals runs with the Cavs didn't show that when he's really given 100%, that he can be a really good defensive player at the guard spot for you. It's not like KD at his peak, is not one of the greatest defenders we haven't seen. When he was playing the 5 for the Warriors, he can really elevate his play. And Harden, once a guy who people rip for playing poor defense, has become a really solid defender. He's especially like good on switches against some bigger guys. So the Nets, like, to me, I look at that team and it's like they need help around the edges with some of their other winged players with depth. Finding another big. They just signed Pell, who should help a little bit, behind DeAndre Jordan. But finding one more guy, to me, can help raise the floor of the team, like it's a defensive unit. And their ceiling is not just one finals, it's multiple, and obviously it's hard to do that and need a lot of luck along the way too. But having these guys together, like, could just lead to some obscene offense with still pretty good defense with the right guys around them.
Are there any available role players? Because I know there's some free agents floating around too, like that you think the Nets are looking at or should look at.
I had a conversation with an exec this week about that, and because we were talking about the Nets, so I was like, who do you think they would look for? Who are the guys out there? And what they said to me was this: because of the league's new rules with the play-in tournament, which means, so normally in the NBA playoffs, 8 teams in each conference, 16 total, make the postseason. This year, there will be the 7, 8, 9, and 10 seed that get to play multiple games for the 7 and 8 spot. And the fact that you have more teams that have a chance to get that 10 spot, that means more teams have reason to win, less reason to let go of players. Players have more reason to be bought in, and so on and so forth, which could mean that there's not going to be a lot of players available for a team like the Nets to go out there and get, like we saw the Lakers get with Markieff Morris last year, like we've seen with other, teams with championship hopes get in the past. Because, people around the league say the Nets are hoping that Andre Drummond, the Cavs center, gets bought out.
Oh my gosh.
That's what people say they're hoping for, but that's unlikely. Like, it's so unlikely because Cleveland's in it. They're in it partially because they're pretty good, but also because they have more playoff spots to get in. So we might not see a lot of options out there, which is, I'm not really answering your question, but like, I don't know if there will be many options. This could be a really limited buyout period, and like, they don't have any picks, so there's not much they can trade to actually get somebody in return. Maybe a JJ Redick, somebody like that from the Pelicans. That's one name I'll
What?
throw out there. Yeah, JJ, I'm serious. Like JJ Redick is one name I'll throw out there. JJ can stroke some threes for you. That would be a great. Put JJ.
I mean that would be incredible, but
Yeah.
like I feel like JJ is way out of their reach. I was like thinking of folks that might actually be available.
JJ could be. I mean,
some,
Pelicans are bad right now. They were bad, really struggling.
Oh, but they need more JJs, not fewer JJs. I mean,
You're right.
their thing is like shooting.
You're right. Though I will say this, JJ, a free agent this coming off season, maybe the Pelicans would think, let's get something, in return. JJ's from, really not from Brooklyn, but lives in Brooklyn with his family. It would make sense, to.
Wow, you're planting some seeds. Well,
Yeah,
so I mean, when I
like
think about the Nets too, though, it's like I feel like at least this is like the thinking you have. So you've got the 3 stars, Joe Harris, DeAndre Jordan, and like what you think is you need some gritty role players who'll just go out there and throw their bodies around and pass the ball to one of the 3 stars.
Get out of the way.
Yeah, like you also got Jeff Green, who
Yeah.
I think is going to be like hugely important on this team, actually.
Mhm.
And so then I look up and I'm just like, who the heck did they get that kind of fits that gritty role playing mold? Who'll just like do his thing and not I mean, and this is just me throwing something out there. This probably doesn't fit, but like a PJ Tucker type,
Yeah.
who'll just go and like.
That's a good one. PJ Tucker's a great example of what they should be going for, because then like you can play him with Jeff Green and play that, and Kevin Durant, and have switchability and still have really good defense out on the court. That makes perfect sense. And I reported on the Ringer a couple weeks back that the demand for PJ Tucker sounds like 3 second-round draft picks, which doesn't sound like a lot, but there are a lot of people around the league who think it is, because he's 35 years old, because he's going to be a free agent this offseason, and because outside of the offense without Harden, let's see what he looks like. Granted, if he were going to Brooklyn, he would be with Harden again and be with other stars and playing off of them. So that makes perfect sense for the Nets. I like that idea. I think him or Redick or both. How about that? Then you get a
I'm just
championship.
thinking about like also like the street free agents who are like out there still, like Iman Shumpert as an example. Like just throw Shumpert out there and have him like
Jamal Crawford, guys like that.
bring back Jamal Crawford. Why not? Exactly.
I mean, it's true. There are some solid vets out there that could be worth an addition, but ultimately, like the Norvell Pell signing is sort of along the lines of what you're saying.
That it is along those lines.
And we'll see if he sticks or not. He was pretty good with Philly last year in a real limited role when other guys were out, but that's what we're probably looking at in all likelihood for the Nets in terms of what they can add. But maybe, like I said, like a Redick or maybe a PJ Tucker, one of those guys could pop up. But we'll see how the market develops. it could be a weird year with trades in the buyout market.
Man, if they were to get Drummond, I mean, that would be like freaking epic. I mean, like that was way beyond what I was thinking.
I don't see it happen personally, but I mean, it's just people around the league say the Nets are hoping he gets bought out, which we'll see, because his trade market when he was with Detroit was so limited. They had a hard time finding anybody that would take him, and it's not like even though he's having a solid season, much would change there. But I do think that there would be enough interest that one team would at least take him on for the rest of the season. We wouldn't see a buyout, but who knows? Crazier things have happened in the NBA, that's for sure, including James Harden getting paired with Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving.
So I'd say like the big thing a lot of us are thinking is that this team seems like a chemistry exercise or experiment now. Conventional wisdom is that if you have 3 stars, one of them needs to sacrifice a bit. And it feels like Kyrie's the natural candidate to sacrifice somehow, maybe because of Harden and Durant's pre-existing relationship, or like his relative, like size or something. Like for whatever reason, it just feels like that.
They're MVPs,
and then it also feels like this, like the chemistry element's going to be key, in that Steve Nash is like obviously the key figure in trying to manage that chemistry. Like, am I the only person who feels like these two things?
No, I mean, it's definitely a big experiment here. And, everything I said earlier about these guys, they could sacrifice and they can fit because they have in the past. It doesn't mean it would work. Circumstances change, relationships change, and maybe the mix just doesn't work. Maybe they lose and these guys clash. Who knows what the future brings? But, it's still, at the end of the day, it's 100% everything you're saying, that putting these level of stars together who, are often isolationists. You've given the ball, they run a pick and roll, the defense switches, and then they are on an island. It's one-on-one. It's like at the park. And that can be hard sometimes. It can feel like your turn, my turn, in terms of, now it's KD's turn, now it's Kyrie's turn, now it's Harden's turn. And sometimes that can lead to stagnant offense. But ultimately, I feel like James Harden, when he was in Houston the last 4 or 5 years, he became that ISO player, that guy who's dominating the ball. But when he was in OKC, he could run off screens and he could run off of handoffs and not have the ball in his hands and still be a threat. And KD himself went to Golden State, improved as a passer, became a guy who played even more off ball than he did in OKC. I feel like those guys have shown a willingness to do that when it comes to competing for championships, and that they can do it again here. And ultimately, with Brooklyn and Steve Nash especially, it's going to be on him as the head coach and that whole coaching staff to put these players in positions to succeed, and then for the players to play with the effort necessary on defense to complement what will be a high scoring offense. Like, this offense is going to put up points. Like, it's up to the stars to bring that defensive mindset, to me, more so than the offensive sacrifice. Like, they got to be the leaders of the defense, and we'll see. I mean, it's a long season, but I think they can.
Interesting. So it's like a defensive sacrifice more than an offensive sacrifice that you think is being called for. I think Steve Nash might agree with you. He just came out and said that.
I mean, it's like the type of thing where, let's say you're not getting, X amount of possessions per game, 30 possessions instead of you're getting 20. You got to put that energy you would put into those extra 10 possessions into defense. That's what needs to happen. And Kyrie, I'll say this, like, before his hiatus away from the court, when he opened the season, the first couple of games, he was really busting his butt on defense. He was setting a tone for the team, and it looked like playoff Kyrie. And I don't expect that over the full regular season. He's probably going to coast at certain points, as you should when you might be playing into the finals. But if he's able to turn back to that level in the playoffs, like we've seen him do in the past, I have a hard time seeing anybody beating the Nets in the Eastern Conference. Like, the Bucks have too many holes. Some of these other teams have so many holes. I feel like could be competitive against the Celtics. It could be competitive against the Bucks and the Sixers, but I still feel like the Nets have higher upside than any of these teams.
Wow, you heard it here, everyone. Kevin O'Connor is picking the most fascinating team. Go Brooklyn. Go Steve Nash. I'm a fan of a lot of folks associated with this team. I want Steve Nash to succeed. So I hope you are right.